an aircraft that can carry 90 passengers for 800 kilometers means that on many city pairs and even some of the busiest city pairs in the world, you could operate this aircraft. And if you can do it with an acceptable economic profile, so if you can keep your operational costs similar or maybe even lower to what they have now with narrow bodies, I mean, then that's a game changer, of course, because then you don't have only zero emissions completely, but also a product that actually is very favorable economics wise. And also for consumers, that means that your ticket prices will remain similar.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. Daniel, it's great to be speaking with you. Thank you for being on the podcast with us. Tell us a bit about your background. I believe you have a rich history in aviation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been working for a number of years in aviation now with Panta. Actually, I didn't start in aviation. I mean, I've been working in technology and innovation. I worked with Google for a number of years, and then was a co-owner of a company. Also more in the digital space, but I joined Panta after that to work on aviation. Panta was set up by my father actually 40 years ago. It's a bit of a family business, and so I grew up with aviation being all around. And Panta is the owner of the Fokker IP and has been involved after the bankruptcy of Fokker in the 90s. Fokker was one of the largest OEMs in the world and was based in the Netherlands, and there's obviously still parts of it that are continuing today, of which one, Fokker Services Group, which is the MRO arm, is also part of the Panta group. So I've been involved more on the sustainability side for a couple of years now, and with my startup background and kind of from a technology and innovation perspective, I've been helping push that forward.
That's very interesting. What led you to start Elysian then?
Yeah, so Elysian was started as a project within Panta. So I think at Panta we were looking at, we thought we had a good position to play a role in making aviation sustainable, and we were looking for people to interact on with that. And so that's how the connection happened between myself, Reinhard de Vries, and Rob Wolleswinkel. So how we ended up founding Elysian and spinning it off from Panta. But actually, Rob initially had put some ideas on a spreadsheet, and then we created a project group around that. And then Reinhard from the TU Delft at the time created the first conceptual design. And so it started like that, very scrappy, and then eventually we decided there was so much good stuff there that we created a company together.
Okay, so what Elysian is today, it's a 90-seat battery electric aircraft. How do you see the size plane fitting into the market compared to other small electric aircraft concepts?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, the power really is in the fact that it's a larger plane, and that was also how we started on the outset. So of course there are a lot of smaller aircraft designs out there, and actually most have thought that this is kind of the way to go, and that is because it's kind of very logical that batteries are very heavy, and if you start kind of trying to incorporate those into the most efficient, most optimal aircraft designs of today, you very quickly run into weight problems. And so the conclusion is that you go for smaller aircraft designs. But actually, what we have found and what we've also published into papers and the scientific research that we came out with, which is the basis underlying Elysian, is that that is not the right way to think about the problem. That actually, if you there are technical benefits of starting from scratch and actually creating a totally different aircraft design, which allows for longer flight. And actually, if you can carry more people and fly further with a sort of acceptable battery pack range, which you can achieve by creating a very large plane with a very large wing and a small fuselage, which I guess we'll get into a little bit more later on. Yeah, you also reach another benefit, which is you have a kind of commercial solution that can massively impact aviation emissions because 50% of all flights are under 1,000 kilometers, around 650 miles. And that's around 20% of total aviation CO2 emissions. So that price is very big, but at the same time, a larger plane also means that you can compete on operational costs. That it's actually an attractive product for airlines to incorporate at those ranges per seat kilometer cost. And that means also it becomes a viable option for consumers economically down the line, which is very important, of course, to make aviation really sustainable.
Uh, I like the approach that you're taking, but there's skepticism around battery electric. For example, one recent forecast claimed that an aircraft like the Dornier 228 could only fly for 30 minutes if powered by batteries. How
Yeah.
do you battle that? Because ultimately you are carrying the weight of the batteries. We've seen a lot of hybrid concepts which carry some SAF to reduce that thing. What about range and versions and things like that? How do you battle the skeptics?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. I mean, I must note that I'm not an aerospace engineer, but I'll explain it at a conceptual level. And I think the best way to explain it is that, it's again this problem of electrifying smaller turboprops, and you get to this outcome. It's a very, actually, Dornier is a perfect example of that problem on a conceptual level, where the weight of the batteries is such that you cannot get very far, and then a smaller plane also means that you can actually carry less batteries than a larger plane. So I think that the skepticism of retrofitting a turboprop with and electrifying it in that way is correct. The conclusion that means that larger battery electric aircraft or battery electric aircraft in general is not a viable solution for aviation is not correct, and that's what we've shown. And yeah, the key of that sort of the essence of that, how to explain that, is again by starting from scratch and really looking at the ratio between structure weight, battery weight, and passenger weight. And some key design choices, putting batteries into the wing, having benefits there with span loading and aerodynamics benefits, having a reserve energy system. That means that you don't need to tap into your battery range and you can optimize for maximum climate impact for reserves, and distributed propulsion with 8 engines for efficiency purposes. So yeah, it's a very different approach than the Dornier example.
When you take this to airlines, I'm sure you've been speaking to some. What kind of feedback
Yeah.
do you get?
Yeah, real excitement, because I think, again, an aircraft like this really provides them with a more mainstream solution than has been presented to them until now, and really based on aerospace engineering principles. But of course, an aircraft that can carry 90 passengers for 800 kilometers means that on many city pairs, and even some of the busiest city pairs in the world, you could operate this aircraft. And if you can do it with an acceptable economic profile, so if you can keep your operational costs similar or maybe even lower to what they have now with narrow bodies, I mean, then that's a game changer, of course, because then you don't have only zero emissions completely, but also a product that actually is very favorable economics wise, and also for consumers that means that your ticket prices will remain similar.
So let's talk about how you get these prices low, right? And that's
Right.
a lot to do with the aircraft design. I've seen the
Right.
E9X aircraft concept that you've done, and there are a few interesting things. There are wing-mounted batteries. There are folding wingtips like the 777X. Can you
Yeah.
explain how this optimizes the plane for electric propulsion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything that has been done in terms of the configuration and design choices are related to optimizing for range and efficiency and aerodynamics. Actually, a lot of different configurations were tested, applied, some of which looked way more out there than the current design, which actually on the surface looks like a regular narrow body or regional aircraft. But if you look closely, you'll see that the ratios and the size differences between, for example, the wing and the fuselage are really different, and that's kind of the key here. Well, you mentioned the batteries integrated into the wing. That's a very important element. So you get this very large wing, which has batteries fully incorporated across the wing, allowing for this weight to kind of be useful when it comes to the aerodynamics. It has eight electric motors of 1.4 megawatts. Again, all to do with the efficiency and distribution of power. And then we have this low wing configuration, and that also made us choose to have landing gear in dedicated pods in sort of nacelles at the back of the low wing. We have a reserve energy system that is placed in the aircraft, and we have low noise propellers. So noise is very important, obviously, especially for an aircraft like this. And then, yeah, lastly, you mentioned the folding wingtips. Well, to be able to achieve this, so to be able to actually fly 90 passengers for 800 kilometers with this battery pack, this sort of 360 watt hour per kilogram battery pack, we need a a wingspan of 42 meters, and we still want to be able to fit into narrow body hubs at the airport. So we want to be able to operate like a narrow body, and so have similar requirements like a 2,000-meter runway and 36-meter wingspan. So to achieve this, we use the folding wingtips that you mentioned before.
So it's with that larger wingspan, it's almost like a glider.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a flying wing or like a glider kind of principle. Yeah,
Yeah,
but in a different way, of course.
aerodynamically speaking.
Yeah,
When you build a new aircraft, I mean, I believe you intend to have this operational by 2033. What are some of
correct.
the major development milestones and challenges that you have to overcome in the next decade to achieve this timeline? You've got 9 years there.
Yeah, so currently we are in what we call a risk reduction phase. So we've shown that the overarching aerospace engineering principles and the physics of that work, and we've worked on that together with the Technical University in Delft, validating this and also being involved with writing this research. Of course, there's so many challenges, and we've identified sort of 10 groups of challenges that we're now working through. We can think of things like thermal management or how to integrate the batteries in the wing safely, etc. So we're working on that with different universities and research institutes. After that, we go more into like a configuration phase where we really start to test these things at a kind of component subsystem level, etc. Working towards two really key moments. One is a battery tech freeze. So of course we need to have the battery cells that we need with the right specs on time to be able to certify them and then certify them in a pack and then safely into the integration, the wing integration, and then of course eventually the aircraft design freeze. So that's sort of between the period of 2028 and 2030, and then from 2030 on, you really go into your kind of first full scale prototype. And then the certification process begins with flight testing, and that takes another 2-3 years at least.
Where does the regulator come in for certification? When does that start?
Yeah, I mean, so from day one, we have, of course, we are, aware of the current landscape, and we're also aware that a lot of these technologies are new. I mean, we try to work we try to have some design choices which perhaps make it easier to certify this aircraft, but a lot of things are new, and a lot of things are also things that the regulators are figuring out at the moment. Um, we have made it a priority from the beginning to focus very heavily on this. So we are working together with consultants who have certified aircraft before. And we've done a pretty extensive analysis, and we're doing that sort of as we go now. We've done a first analysis, and now we're working through an update of that where the real challenges lie and where the difficult areas lie when it comes to certification. Of course, pretty quickly you want to actually also be involved. We are through some organizations, some industry organizations, we are involved with conversations with the regulators, but that's more on a higher level. And eventually, of course, we also will be quite heads on working on the certification. So we're taking that very seriously, and of course, that's one of the key, let's say, we have our technical challenges, and then we have our some of our other key things to focus on. This definitely one of the biggest ones, maybe the biggest one.
Now, every time I speak to electric aircraft manufacturers or innovators on this podcast and elsewhere, the issue of battery density comes
Yeah.
in. How do you intend to achieve a high battery pack energy density, which has to be significantly higher than today's electric cars, like a Tesla? What's needed?
Yeah, and I think, of course, the electric vehicle market, the car market is growing very fast and has slightly different needs. What you do see is that battery suppliers are increasingly working on aviation solutions. And the pack we need in our design is, of course, higher than an electric vehicle, but it's not uh, uh, it's something that exists today at a laboratory level. In order to fly the 800 kilometers, which we want to achieve with our first generation, we'll need around 360 watt hour per kilogram, and that's definitely a step up from what exists today in electric cars, or what battery cell companies are working on in their R&D, but it's not like completely a completely out of this world assumption. And one important element is that that's what we need to fly 800 kilometers. If we use a lower density pack, which is much closer to what's available for electric cars today, let's say, something similar that's in the Tesla today, this aircraft could still operate and fly maybe 500 kilometers, which is still worthwhile. So this design really relies on the aerospace kind of design principles that I mentioned, and a little bit less on the actual battery density. One of the other things is, of course, we don't need it today. We need it in a couple of years. Well, the development still needs to happen, and it needs to happen in time. And one thing that I could add is that we focus on lithium ion solutions, to be sure. So, and there's a lot of money going into research of other, maybe more capable materials that could accelerate our process or progress. We're not currently, betting on those, but we know that they are looked at, and we hope that they eventually also will have the right specs so they can push our range further.
I think that does make sense. One of the things, of course, is unlike typical planes today, for an electric plane, when you take off, you need to charge it. When you land, you need to charge it. You need airport infrastructure on both the sides.
Yeah.
How are you working with airports to ensure that infrastructure is in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work very closely in the ecosystem. So we kind of revealed ourselves, our design, our company earlier this year, but we've been working on it under the radar for more than 2 years. And even in that time, we have been working closely with airlines and with a number of airports. Now that we're out, of course, things are progressing very, very quickly. we've become part of a number of initiatives, including the Power Up initiative in the Netherlands, which kind of involves multiple airports, such as Eindhoven Airport, Rotterdam The Hague Airport, and which is also supported by the Schiphol Group. So Schiphol is also, the third largest airport in the world, is also involved with this, as are some other organizations in the aerospace ecosystem. So it's extremely important. At the same time, we're also working with companies working on power solutions themselves. So the charging capabilities that you will need at airports for an aircraft like this are, you're talking about megawatts and double-digit megawatts, and that's something that is for airports is not available and seems extremely large and maybe even unattainable, while for some other industries it's quite normal. I mean, for example, if you look at the maritime industry, the Rotterdam harbor, for example, they use those kind of solutions currently, and they're not maybe as far away as you might think. So yeah, we're very aware of, let's say, what conditions are needed to make this happen, but we also think that they're achievable, and we notice that airports are quite keen to be involved with this.
This is great that you're already working with a few smaller airports that support regional aviation. If I go back to basics of airline business models, especially small regional airlines or low-cost airlines, the key is turnaround time. So let's
Yeah.
say an Elysian aircraft lands at The Hague and takes off for Rotterdam. Short, very, very short flight. Um,
Yeah.
what's the turnaround time? Can you support airlines in 20 minutes, 30 minutes turnaround times? For that, will there need to be a supercharger like there is one for Teslas now? How long is the charging going to take? Is there going to be other maintenance happening? What's different about electric aircrafts that does not happen today that airlines need to consider for turnaround times?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I think 20-30 minutes is going to be quite difficult, especially in the beginning. What we are targeting is a 45-minute charge time from 0 to 100%. Of course, in many situations, you might not need to fully discharge. Of course, you wouldn't fully discharge, but let's say to 10%, and charge to 100, you might be able to do with a little bit less. But of course, this is something that very much relates again to the battery cell specifications. And when you're looking at those kind of elements like cycle life and C rates, that's definitely something that will be a huge driver to how fast our turnaround can be. So I think that being able to achieve those kind of turnaround times, 45 minutes, that's something we're targeting, and that's something that should be achievable. Yeah, we also know that for airlines, that's sort of, some of them have said to us, as long as it can be under an hour, given, the fact that it has so many benefits and it's emission free, that's workable.
Hmm. That's interesting. What about the grid where the electricity is coming from? Because ultimately,
Yeah.
for it to be completely green, we want this to be clean electricity, green electricity. You've got, countries like France, which is primarily powered by nuclear. You've got
Yeah.
right next to it, Germany, which is not clean energy, at least today. How do you get there?
Yeah, I mean, so maybe 2 points on that, and of course we could probably talk an entire podcast about that, but maybe to highlight two elements of that. One is, of course, the green should be as green as possible, and then from the grid to the actual aircraft energy, it's all about fuel efficiency, right? It's about how much loss of energy do you have from the moment that you actually can get the electricity, and then with transport potentially if you need it, and then to the aircraft and to the actual takeoff energy and the flight energy. When you look at that sort of chain, supply chain of energy, if you will, yeah, it's unsurprising that using batteries and using electromotors is the most efficient. I mean, it allows for the least amount of loss if you compare it to traditional fuel SAF or even hydrogen. So it's a way to use your energy that you have, the limited energy that you have, whether it's gray or green, and keep it green and make it as useful as possible. That's point one. Point two is that we will be creating a huge amount of battery capacity for these aircraft. And of course, these aircraft need to be, they are very intensively used and they will need to be, those batteries will need to be replaced. And there will be, we expect that the regulators will put quite strenuous demands on, at what kind of state of charge, discharge level, and quality level those battery packs will need to be replaced. And we're under the assumption that that will be 90%, at least in the beginning. That means that you have a huge potential for the second life of these batteries and can use those to, for example, store surplus, have secondary applications, and all kinds of things that can kind of take some burden away from the grid in this process of recharging and powering airports and the whole infrastructure of electricity. So
That
we
is
actually think it's part of the solution rather than the problem.
that is actually very interesting. Having a second life for the batteries, it's almost as if having aircraft that get leased again and again and again and get multiple lives. Are
Yep.
you looking to create a vertically integrated company where you have control of the battery technology as well as the aircraft, as well as upstream and downstream, or are you looking to work with some external battery provider and see things?
I think it's a little too early to comment on that, and also not something I want to disclose right now. What I can say is that, of course, we will be very, very heavily involved at a certain point in the development chain, let's say. And I think battery cells themselves, that's not something we're going to produce, and it's something that we will work very close together with, but can use what's being made. Yeah, and then of course, like how the battery packs are designed and how they are fit into the aircraft is kind of key. So that's something we want to keep very close to heart, and I'll sort of leave it at that for now.
I'll be watching this space with much interest then, because you did not answer no. So I'm I'm very curious what comes here, but definitely a key area for innovation. Let's talk about funding. We've heard figures from founders of new aircraft companies. They need anywhere from $500 million to $5 billion based on what they're trying to develop.
Yeah.
What are some of the funding needs? What does it take to raise, to invest, to build a new aircraft, and how are you planning to get there?
Yeah, I mean, an aircraft program is very expensive. There's just no way around that. So, we think in our estimations, we think it's north of 6 billion for an aircraft program like this. It could be more. I think it's unlikely that it's less, but you never know. And then when you kind of in the sort of 10 years of development from beginning to end, you can split that into a couple of phases of 2 to 3 years each. And then you can kind of imagine that it goes 10x each phase. So we are now funded for this risk reduction phase and a little bit beyond. So we've raised $10 million for that. And then beyond that, we will kind of have to ramp up our funding as we go through each stage. We're not currently raising, but we are preparing for it. And we do notice that there is a lot of interest. We think that it's very important that we have the right partners, whether it comes to investors or suppliers or at all kinds of levels, even governments and things like that, regulators, to make this happen. So we are very focused on working with the right companies and really creating the right ecosystem and the right team to make this happen.
Until now, where have you received the most support from? Has it been government or research grants or somewhere else or private investors?
No, it's all private until now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether your previous experience with Panther Holdings, and Fokker. How's that come in to help you um, rethinking how to run Elysian?
Yeah, it's a huge help because yes, we are a startup, but we are a startup embedded in a huge history and an ecosystem. You know, since Fokker went bankrupt in the 90s, a lot of the infrastructure around that, being such a significant OEM, continued and is still there to this day, and we can kind of benefit from that and tap into that, especially with our sister companies. And yeah, we also still benefit from being a startup. So we have sort of this best of both worlds scenario where I think we can be small and nimble. We can, we have some people, including myself, who have experience building startups and growing them, and all the dynamics around that. And at the same time, we really have people who have, led aircraft programs before. We have people who have really designed, built, and produced aircraft. So, and certified, very important, not to forget. So I think we have a lot of this knowledge in house, and it allows us to, yeah, maybe avoid some of the mistakes that you might make if you really start from scratch. So, that in combination with having this unique design that we think really changed a lot of people's perspective on what's possible, also in the academic world. Yeah, it's very powerful. It's a powerful combination in our eyes.
So let's talk about the team. You mentioned a team just a minute ago. How large is the team, and what is the composition? Is it mostly engineers? How experienced are these people? How large is the team now?
Yeah, you'd be surprised that the team is actually very small, the core team, when it comes to FTE. So we have 5 FTE at the moment. Having said that, though, we're doing a lot of work together with research institutes and universities, as I mentioned. So we kind of outsource some of this risk reduction research work. If you look at the total number of people, let's say in FTE, numbers, it's around 30 people, 30 FTE who are working on this. So, it's a significant amount of people. But of course, now we are going to ramp up the team significantly towards the end of this year and into the next year.
And these 5 people, what's their background? Are they aviation
Ah,
veterans?
yes, they are. So, two are aerospace engineers of the founders. I'm the non-engineer.
So three in
And
the
the other
founding
two,
team, huh? Three
sorry?
co-founders. Three co-founders?
Yeah, so we are with three. Two are engineers. So Rob and Reinhard are both aerospace engineers by training. Reinhard was a postdoc at the Technical University of Delft before he joined Elysian as
Hmm.
co-founder and created the conceptual design that is the E9X today. And Rob Wolleswinkel is an aerospace engineer who then was a Boston Consulting Group partner for many years, and then went back into his study books to create the initial ideas that created this design. Then the other two are also engineers. So we have very engineering led, and the engineering part of our company is very important, very prominent.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to get the team mix right, especially at the beginning. You want to be focused on the right areas, engineering in this case,
Yeah.
to meet the milestones. What is your long-term vision for Elysian, Daniel, in sustainable aviation? Do you foresee expanding into hydrogen or hybrid electric at some point, or do you want to stay focused pure play electric battery?
Yeah, look, we are currently focused on the E9X, and so I find it a bit difficult to really look that far ahead. Of course, we are looking to create value at every step and being scientific about our approach. Thinking out loud, I mean, it probably is more logical for us to focus on, to taking this further and making the aircraft bigger and larger ranges within battery electric as battery technology evolves, than really, changing course or pivoting to something like hydrogen. For Elysian, that probably wouldn't make sense, but you never know.
You
And
never.
in a way, the E9X is technically a hybrid because we have this reserve energy system, which we really only use for reserves, so we can maximize our battery range. But there is an element of hybridization because of that. So we are technically already a
A bit
hybrid
of a
electric
hybrid,
company.
right?
Yeah,
Because of the reserve. So
yeah.
if I was to give you an elevator pitch, you enter an elevator with Bill Gates, let's say, and Breakthrough
Uh-huh.
Energy's CEO, and you've got 90 seconds, and he asks you, so, why do you think you're going to be the success, not ATR, not Heart Aerospace, amongst all these electric aircraft? What makes you stand out? What would you reply?
Yeah, so it's the design combined with the business case. So this design allows for with a reasonable battery pack to impact 20% of aviation total emissions, which is kind of under 1,000 kilometers. And if you make a stop or you have a transfer system, 2,000, so that's around you're getting near half of total emissions. So the price is very big, and that's hard to achieve in a different way. And secondly, a team that is both have startup experience and extensive aviation experience embedded in an ecosystem with a partner and investor base who have real experience in making aircraft programs happen and certifying aircraft. And I think that's that's a pretty unique combination and hard to replicate.
I'd be very curious how this goes, Daniel. Thank you very much for your insights. Now, the final part of this interview is what I call the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a bit more personally. And we'll start with something simple. What's your favorite airline?
So this is, I maybe cheat a little bit here because I will mention an airline that doesn't exist anymore. But actually, Panta used to have an airline, used to be the parent company of an airline, and my father was very involved with that throughout the 90s and the 2000s, called the Vlaamse Luchtvaartmaatschappij. So that's the Flemish airline, and they operated between Belgium, the UK, and Netherlands mainly. And they were a small regional airline focused very much on business travel. So you mentioned like fast turnaround times. That's very close to heart for me because they really kind of created these flights between, for example, Rotterdam, The Hague Airport, and London City, and they really were part of the development of London City Airport. And I guess quite key to why it's an important regional airport right now in the middle of London City. So I would pick that one. And as a teenager, I flew a lot with them. Lived in London, so it's I think there are a lot of things that we can take also from that apply to Elysian and how it might work in operations. Really no nonsense approach, getting to the airport, half an hour, 40 minutes before your flight, using small or medium-sized airports, and really focusing on like the most seamless experience that you can have as a passenger.
This reminds me of JSX in the US,
Mm.
just go up and board a nice small jet and get over flying. What's your favorite airport?
Favorite airports? That's a good one. I think I would pick one in the Dominican Republic. It's Punta Cana, I think, because it's just such a beautiful. It's all palm trees and
Nice.
palm. It's basically like a beach hotel, but then an airport, all wood and palm, and just it's a one that comes to mind.
I will be sure to send this episode to someone I know at Punta Cana Airport, one of the
Okay.
executives. I think he'll be delighted to know. It's the first time that airport has been mentioned on this podcast. What's your favorite book?
I thought about this for a while. It's very hard to pick a favorite book, of course, but I think the one that came to mind the first was Shantaram. So this is a book, about an Australian convict who ends up in India and then,
In a slum.
becomes part of the slum life in Mumbai. And I really loved it because it's such a crazy story. It's a true story written in a very poetic way. And it's also about kind of beating the odds in a way. So I guess it's a bit of a cool
I wonder
message.
why it never got made into a movie. I think I first read it in 2006 or 2007, and bought a pirated copy from, I think, a boy from a slum in Mumbai while I was in an auto rickshaw.
Oh, wow.
So that
Yeah,
was
I
very
read it a long time ago. I have to reread it. But actually, you might be happy to hear that there is a series on, I think, Apple TV that you can watch, which is pretty good, actually. I mean, it's
what is it
not
called?
like the best series ever made, but it's really touches on the key feelings of the book. So I can recommend it.
What is it called?
It's called Shantaram.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
all right. I
it's quite
wasn't
new.
aware.
It's like maybe 2 years old. Yeah, one
Okay,
or two
I
years
will
old. Yeah.
definitely check it out. Thank you. Oh, what's your favorite city?
Yeah, it's funny because it's a bit maybe like cocky to pick a city that you live in, but I always end up at Amsterdam because I guess my top three would be Amsterdam, Berlin, Barcelona. And I would put Amsterdam at number one because it's sort of the perfect size city in my mind. You know, you can cycle everywhere, distances are very close. It's obviously very beautiful architecturally, but culturally, it's just extremely rich in terms of what it has to
Yeah.
offer. All artists come there, all expositions, lots of museums. So I think the sort of ratio of culture or things to do and things to visit versus how large the city is very good. So yeah, Amsterdam,
Okay.
promoting my own city. Yeah.
Amsterdam. What do you do in your free time?
So I actually recently started flying lessons. So I am flying small aircraft now. I'm getting my PPL, so that takes some of my free time, where I'm also doing theory and all kinds of trainings and the flying itself. So that's quite time consuming. And I am very involved in music. So I've made music since a very young age and produce music and play
Do you
music.
play
So.
any instruments?
I played the piano, basically just like chords that I incorporate in my music. When I was very young, I played the saxophone, but I haven't touched a saxophone in many, many years. But yeah,
Okay.
mostly digital instruments.
Maybe I'll search you on YouTube and not on Google next time, or
Sure, sure.
or Spotify.
If you can find me, but
Yeah.
I will send
What
you some stuff.
what is something you want to learn? It seems like you're already learning flying and you're playing music. Is there something you would like to still learn?
Yeah, I mean, flying is definitely the one I would say that I'm currently focusing on. I want to kind of, and I really, really love. I mean, I knew I would like it, but I love it. I mean, really, my first flight was so cool, and I had a great instructor who let me do so many things myself. And even we were in an aerobatics plane, so we made like a looping and a barrel roll during our first flying lesson, which kind of like in the car home made me be completely like excited and hooked. So yeah, that's a big focus now. I mean, I think there are so many things I'd like to learn. I definitely would like to. I really like cooking. I'd like to be a better cook, but yeah, it's not
Okay.
you can't don't
You're
always have time
you're
for
the
everything.
you're the third guest on the show on the trot who loves cooking. So I
Mm.
think I need to do a podcast guest cookout together.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Sounds
get
good.
get all of you
I'm
together
in.
in the summer, and we can all get together and cook perhaps.
Well, it's something I want to learn, so I don't know if I'm good enough to do a cookout, but let's see.
Hang
I'm
out
I'm
with others
happy.
who
I'm
are
happy to
curious about
partake. Yeah, happy to partake.
it. Exactly. What is the best advice you've received?
Yeah, I mean, also this one I thought I had to think about it a little bit, but I think I'll take one that maybe seems obvious, but to me it's very important, which is take your time and prioritize your time. So my father always used to say a thing that his father used to say to him, which is in Dutch it rhymes, so it's tijd is prioriteit, and it means time is priority. And whenever I would say, he would ask me something, and I would say, I don't have time, he would say time is priority. I mean, you make your own time by prioritizing it. So I think that's kind of such a learning, and I'm not always, I always tend to kind of do a lot of things, and sometimes you have to kind of tell yourself, take your time. There's some beauty in patience, and good things come with time, and to those who wait, but also prioritize your time very well. And I think that's the best advice.
Final question. If we are speaking in a year's time and we are popping champagne, what are we celebrating?
I think we probably have reached all our milestones with Elysian, and we've including our funding, and we are on our way to making this aircraft happen, and also in terms of certification and all kinds of other elements. So,
Okay.
but I think probably if you take a year's time, that could be quite aligned with our funding timeline. So maybe we're cheersing on a close funding round with some great strategic partners.
Fantastic. Amen to that. And Daniel, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking.
Thank you. Thank you so much as well, Shashank.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simplifying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our Supervising Editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Mira Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimain is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.